na construção de cidades inteligentes. Para liderar a Masterclass de agora, design e a participação no contexto de cidades inteligentes, chamamos ao palco o Dr. Marcos Foth, professor de Design Lab na Universidade de Queensland, na Austrália, e participará das discussões também o professor de Design Gráfico na Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina e coordenador do Centro Sapiens de Florianópolis, Dr. Luiz Salomão Ribas Gomes. Por favor.
Great. Hi everyone, my name is Marcus. I'm another professor from Australia, from QUT. It's my first time in Brazil and first time in South America. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm also quite impressed. I think we can all congratulate each other for breaking a record. I was just looking up the countries that have been winning the marathon. Does anyone know what are the kind of countries that are usually competing in the marathon, that are, trying to break the record? I think it's just over 2 hours. Does anyone follow that? Yeah, it's Kenya. But today, I think we can include Brazil in there for a 3-hour marathon of sitting through, these presentations without enough coffee. So I think as part of what Australians have to do, Australians have to always go overseas. Whenever we go somewhere to another country, there's no other way, right? Because we're on a big island. And so as part of going overseas, we always have to do long-haul travel. And so that's why we're always very well educated on deep vein thrombosis. Deep vein thrombosis comes from sitting in a room like this for 3.5 hours. So that's why I want to get everyone to stand up. And I can't take the risk of anyone having deep vein thrombosis in here. So please all stand up. And we all need to kind of just relax a little bit. That's right. Say hi to your neighbour, introduce yourself. Because, it's been very uncomfortable sitting for this long. And we need to just loosen up a little bit. Does that feel better? Yeah? Okay. So this is already, and if you want to, feel free to stand a little bit, and then if you get tired, we'll stand down again. That's already a mini micro example of participation, which is what I'm going to talk to you about, which is how we are talking and at the same time applying different participatory design strategies in our work to create smart cities. And the work that I'm talking about has actually evolved over a number of years. We've been playing in that space of urban informatics, as I started to call it early on in 2006, and the space of smart cities for this quite a long time. There is this bit of a timeline here where you can see there were a number of research centers early on that followed that intersection of the digital and the physical, the digital space and the physical space and how they came together. There was the Center for Advanced Spatial Analysis at the Bartlett School at UCL in London. My colleague Carlo Ratti at MIT created the Sensible City Lab, and in 2006 we started the Urban Informatics Research Group at QUT. And then after the global financial crisis, there's a whole bunch of research centers that emerged in that space of smart cities and urban informatics. The work that we do in that group at QUT is very multidisciplinary. We have people from the social sciences, the technical sciences, as well as what I call the spatial sciences. So architects, urban planners, people from the arts and humanities, and also people from computer science and human-computer interaction. The definition that I've put up there, I'm going to skip in order to save some time. And if you go to our website, you can see a whole bunch of the projects that we've been working on. I'm going to show you just a couple of those. But just this list here shows you that we are focusing on quite a wide array of different topics, from mobility to living labs to innovation to data visualizations, and the list goes on. And all of this is now embedded in the design lab that we created in 2016, and more information about that is at that address qut.design. Now, Professor Tan already mentioned these different generations, or these different development stages of smart cities by giving them a certain numbering system. And I'm going to, in this presentation, pick up on this a little bit. I'm going to skip City 1.0, which was the very starting point of cities, and I'm going to go straight into City 2.0 in order to make a point of how that field has evolved and what might be the trajectory, what might be the direction of where we are heading in that space. And the way that I structure this is to look at this relationship between the city government and the people living in cities. So at this very basic level, without that technology plays a crucial role, we really kind of think of the city government, the municipality, as the administrators. In Australia, there's a very naughty saying that is about local governments and municipalities being about the roads, rates and rubbish. In the relationship then with the people is really that they happen to live in the city. So it becomes more interesting once a smart city approach or strategy is introduced, because the relationship between the municipality and the people living there, it changes. So especially after the global financial crisis, a whole bunch of the accounting firms and tech providers, IBM and Cisco and so forth, they thought it would be a great idea to expand their portfolio of cash cows. And so they told cities that they shouldn't operate a city anymore like a city. A city should be operated like a company, right? Because once you think of a city like a company, you can sell all the kind of software and consultancy services that were developed in the 70s and 80s. So that was a clever idea in order to make a lot of money. And the relationship between the city and the residents changes to that of service providers and consumers. Now, let's look at this a little bit closer. The smart city in this kind of 2.0 version that I'm kind of critical about. Can we get a little audio from the video playing? We'll do without the audio. What you see here is a very early video that IBM produced about the smarter planet strategy and in turn the smart city strategy. Now, what I find interesting about this very early example of a smart city marketing video is that all of you guys, all of us, are all just these little blobs, and they're just jumping around. They're all undifferentiated little puppets. And that's very useful from this helicopter point of view, where I'm standing right now from a distance. I'm looking at all of you, you're all just a whole bunch of people, undifferentiated, doesn't matter. And so it suits the bird's eye view of optimization and data analytics to look at the city from that kind of point of view, because it then enables big aggregated data sets to be analyzed for optimization and driving efficiency gains. The other kinds of items that were very popular in the early days of smart cities were around introducing free Wi-Fi, smart lighting. This is an example of Canada Bay, which is a suburb in Sydney. Now, these light poles that look very pretty here, they've recently had a lot of media coverage. Have people seen this when the protests in Hong Kong were in the media? Because people actually took chainsaws and tried to cut them like trees, because they were afraid of all the surveillance and the data that was captured through facial recognition technology that was then transferred over to a whole bunch of Chinese companies in order to look at identifying individuals active in the protests in Hong Kong. And so a number of people started to demolish those smart streetlights. Urban screens was another big kind of investment item in these early days of smart cities. And the stuff that we don't really see, which is the invisible digital data traces of credit card transactions, transport, cards, different kinds of sensors embedded in the city that were also giving the different big data analytics platforms insights about what we were up to and what we are doing. And all of this happens very nicely, tucked away somewhere in something beautiful, the cloud. The problem that I see with a lot of these early examples of smart cities is that they're very engineering driven. So what's your problem? We can solve it through some sort of technical gimmick. If it's, for instance, transport, we might just build more lanes, although research has shown since the 60s and 70s that the more lanes you build, the more induced demand you create for traffic to be car-centric. So the problem in these early days of the smart city is that it's far more driven by the STEM sector of science, technology, engineering and maths, and was lacking contributions from design, from the humanities, and from a wider aspect of the political sciences. So if you look at this example of the IBM control room that was installed here in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 2012, that was usually the photo that a lot of journalists used in order to talk about the smart city, because there was nothing else to point the finger at. What are you going to point the finger at if it's all invisible? Now, some of the lessons that emerged from this first phase of the smart city rollout is that we wanted to avoid what's called vendor lock-in. That's when different companies are trying to create cities that are their own cities. So you would be a Cisco city, an IBM city, a Fujitsu city, and the list goes on. And the different software applications and platforms, they would not be able to talk to each other. This organization was created in Denmark, in Europe, but it's actually been spreading across the world, which is a community of practice of cities that are trying to prevent vendor lock-in. So that's why it's called the Open and Agile Smart Cities Network. There's a map, and you can see it's spread across Europe, but there's actually a whole bunch of cities here in Brazil, and I think Florianópolis is part of it, that signed up to the OASC. I'm not sure why this is not displaying, but we'll just move on. So out of the City 2.0 level, some of the kind of lessons learned from that, they are about pushing for open data and interoperability and having standards between these different pieces of innovation in order for these different cities that are adopting and investing in smart city technology to be able to communicate with each other. The City 3.0 level, as I define it, is now taking this a step further. This is where we're talking about city governments opening up to become facilitators and people are participants. So this is where the design approach becomes much more interesting, and the way that participation facilitates a relationship between these entities. I wrote this piece that you can find on the website of Conversation, where I'm arguing that smart city strategies should actually start with people first, rather than with the technology. This is a picture of Federation Square, which is a civic square in Melbourne, and it has this big screen as part of the square, and you can see here our former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd delivering a speech. Now I'm showing this because the previous, I suppose, smart city level was very much geared towards telling everyone that the city is all about consumption. So you work in the city, you sleep in the city, and you consume. Now, these people that are all aggregated in that square, they're not consuming, they're not consumers. They're actually citizens. They're actually exercising their right to assemblage, their right to protest, their right to communication. And all of that isn't really covered in those previous ways smart city infrastructure and platforms were rolled out. It's been forgotten. And so this is something that we need to remember and reintroduce. Now, it's not actually anything new, because a lot of the research into political science, humanities and urban studies They've been looking at this for a very long time. Technology can play a role in community engagement as well as in community activism. This is a very simple application that back in 2007 we introduced. This is a picture of Cadel Evans, Australian cycling athlete who won the Tour de France, and he came back to Australia to do his victory parade around Federation Square. And so you were able to send messages in a similar way to how we send messages to WhatsApp today. The big difference here is that the messages automatically appear on the screen. So for the next Knowledge City Summit, I'm very happy to share this application so those poor ladies don't have to write down with paper and pencil each little WhatsApp message in order to communicate it. We developed this further in order to, again, research that relationship between the city and the citizens. With this project that's called the Instabooth. It's a portable structure that can be erected where the city is planning new development in order to gain feedback and comments, but it's also providing a bit of a scaffold where the feedback that people are leaving can be displayed to others. If you Google Instabooth and QUT, there's also a video that I can't show you for time reasons, so I'm going to skip over this. But again, it's quite useful to kind of see the different engagement modules that we've developed to get an idea of how technology can be in the hands of citizens in order to provide that dialogue between the city and the citizens. I'm showing you this picture again because the other problem we saw with the IBM control room is that it was providing a lot of analytics capabilities, but it was tucked away, it was closed, it wasn't accessible. And I always said to my students, I want the power of that control room in my pocket. I want it to be in my phone. How can we make this happen? We got this really great visualization space at QUT that's called the Q. And you can see this one is much more open. People can wander in there. There's a whole bunch of touch screens at the bottom level that you can interact with. And it does quite fantastic visualizations. So we were inspired by this more open and permeable approach to data visualization. And so our first case study was food. Specifically food trucks and street vendors, like this one. So what we've done is we've stolen mobile computers on wheels, which is these devices there. They are a screen and a computer combo. And we dragged them across the river from the campus to the place where the food truck operators would pull up and they would have a commercial kitchen. And the kitchen is used by them to prepare the food that they then sell at night. So it's pretty much the gathering place for the food trucks. And so we installed these data visualization as well as data analysis features that allows them to do two things. One is to be more strategic about the placement of where they go. So you don't want to have Italian, 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 Italian all in one row. You want to have a diversity across the different suburbs. So the food trucks could organize themselves and say, Italian goes to Paddington, Korean goes to West End, you've got Chinese food in Hurston, in different suburbs. The other part to it was that we wanted to mash up the data about where crowding occurred. So for instance, we have postgraduate students that would be sitting in the classes between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and when they come out, all that's left is either a microwave or a vending machine. So we work with the food truckies to place themselves on campus exactly at the time that the classes would finish. So those kinds of ways were just trying to provide examples of how the idea of a control room that gathers data can also be broken down for the benefit of people on the ground. So it's kind of like the street level version of the IBM data control room. So the takeaways from this level is around citizen participation. There's another element that I haven't touched upon that is about procurement reform, which is quite important in order to make these things happen and for them to scale up. As well as open innovation to allow others, not just these big companies, to participate in how data analysis can make a difference and can be of benefit to people and to groups of communities. The last level, City 4.0, is what we are hoping to aspire towards with most of the cities that we are working with. That's where the relationship is the most equal. So this is where the city government and the residents are actually collaborating as co-creators. If you're old enough like me, and you're in your mid-60s, then you would remember maybe this cover of Time magazine from 2006 where they had you on the cover. And it was supposed to symbolize that the internet had advanced to become really participatory, that you could be in control of the communication flows, the networks, the profiles, and so forth. I think this is really problematic. Because what it has done is it has created a world of individuals. And so the suggestion is that we actually need to revisit the way that communication can actually give us a means to bring us together for collective action. And you can already see a lot of these examples right now in Chile. You can see them in Hong Kong. And in the past, you've seen them in other places across the world. There's this spectrum which is from IAP2, which is the International Association of Public Participation. And I find this quite useful because people can easily see on that spectrum from inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower, where your different approaches and strategies are positioned. And so we are trying to push with our partners towards the right side, towards collaborate and towards empowerment, rather than just making decisions behind closed doors, like what Professor Tan mentioned. Our city has decided that we all need a $3 billion casino. I don't think so. Part of the research at that level is also looking at and studying the kinds of subcultures and the kinds of subgroups in the city that are using the city in a very different way to just consume, to just buy bubble tea, eat, sleep, and work and repeat. And so one of the examples is graffiti. A graffiti artist looks at the city like a canvas. An athlete that practices parkour uses the city much more like an exercise challenge, like an obstacle parkour. This emergency exit all of a sudden isn't an emergency exit anymore. It's a way to get down from the 7th floor to the ground floor without breaking your leg. These people that are doing yarn bombing, they're taking measurements of street assets and furniture, they come out at night and wrap it all up, and the next day they have a street party. So this bridge that used to be an infrastructure piece to get from A to B, all of a sudden becomes a stage for performances. It actually illustrates how you can slow down the city and appreciate the city for other means than just to get from A to B. The Dîner en Blanc is an initiative that started in Paris in France. Originally it was a form of protest, a peaceful protest where people would gather in usually a very busy part of the city, all dressed in white. They bring white picnic utensils and they have an al fresco dining experience. And this has spread across the world as well. Parking Day is part of this category as well. This is a picture taken in Salzburg in Austria. On a Friday you see the regular road with cars. People are starting to feed the parking meters in order to claim back the city. And then they're having a street party on a Saturday in those spots that they have legally rented out from the city because they're feeding the parking meters. So to finish up, in terms of actually scaling this up and creating some more systemic ways to bring about a more equal relationship between the local government and the citizens, there's different innovation networks and hubs that have been brought about. And sometimes they're called urban innovation hubs, sometimes they're called living labs. We've been studying some of these examples. This one here is from London, the Urban Innovation Centre. The Barcelona Urban Lab has been very progressive in their approach. One of the very exciting parts of what they've been trialing in Spain is what we call technological sovereignty. So we are currently working on a piece that is juxtaposing the alphabet company sidewalk labs debacle that is unfolding in Toronto at the waterfront, where they're creating a whole surveillance state outside China, with the ways that Barcelona is pushing for the citizens to have ownership of the data that is being gathered by the technology that's deployed. And we're also quite fond of the new urban mechanics in Boston, as well as the City Studio Vancouver, which has just been adopted in another city near Brisbane, Logan. Parts of these ecosystems are to bring together some elements of incubator spaces, some elements of open data, but also there's a whole stakeholders coming together from academia, from industry, from libraries, as well as more novel spaces like co-working spaces and maker spaces. Some of these examples we've put together in this edited book that is called Citizens' Right to the Digital City. And this is all about the urban interfaces I mentioned, but also about activism and placemaking. And Saskia Sassen was so kind to write the epilogue for this collection. The innovation model that I mentioned that is often referred to as living labs, we've also been studying, and we've been looking at how they can become more social living labs in order to foster digital participation. And this edited collection is focusing especially on that one. So the takeaways from this City 4.0 level are around creating a more equal relationship and more equitable relationship where we are pushing towards citizen co-creation. We are reviving the notion of the right to the city. And the most progressive piece isn't a technology piece. The most progressive piece in the smart city is a reform of urban policy, because that's where you get the most pushback from the establishment. And so installing smart parking apps is very easy, but changing policy is hard. And I think that's how you measure and assess whether cities are smart and whether they are progressive and innovative. Now you might wonder, what's City 5.0? And I know that people are already sending that question to the WhatsApp channel. So I thought I might kind of anticipate that question. I think City 5.0 is really about tackling the climate emergency. This is me in my spare time. There is not much spare time being a professor at QUT because we get flogged to produce more completions and publications and research income. But every now and then I get the chance to play with my honeybees. And I keep honeybees in Brisbane, in the inner city, on my rooftop. What the bees and being a beekeeper has taught me is a number of things. One thing is that you sometimes need to slow down to appreciate seasonal changes, to appreciate life. So it's not just about slowing down traffic, it's about slowing down life. The irony is that with all the advances of technology, we're actually speeding things up. We can squeeze in more appointments, we can answer more emails. There's Wi-Fi on the train to work, so now people are starting to work even earlier than when they get to the office. Is that what we want? I was thinking. I told about slowing down. I've slowed down the computer. Maybe I crashed it. There's actually a cute picture of a possum that we have as a resident possum. But I might leave it at that. So really the City 5.0 work that we're currently doing is questioning the human-centered design approach to smart cities. A lot of the time when industry and government are translating human-centered design into their commercial contexts, it gets reduced to human convenience and human comfort. And most of the time, that's at the expense of the planet. So we're trying to look at ways that we can actually go back to a notion of planetary health and decentering the human to recognize our entanglement with nature, with the ecosystem. And that is quite a hard task because the human-centeredness is at the moment so ingrained in everything we do. But at the same time, it's increasingly problematic to support and foster human exceptionalism, where we come first and everything else comes second. So that's a challenge that we are looking at and starting to reorient our research group, because for the last 13 years, we've been doing human-centered design. And we are starting to realize now that we need to change things in order to be more That's good, eh? So this is a brush-tailed possum, and it's living on our balcony. It's actually taken over the balcony pretty much. But it's at the same time a mini study for me, because I'm interested in the notion of cohabitation. How is it possible for wildlife to coexist in an urban neighborhood? And installing this nesting box was very simple. It only cost me $30. And it's quite nice to have that level of exposure to native wildlife in Australia, although you're living in an inner city. There is an article where we started to touch upon these things, which is about the more than human. And in this case, we are applying this to media architecture, which is talking about light pollution and the impact of digital installations in cities on native wildlife. We've also been looking at different methods to study this, which is published here at the Participatory Design Conference. And you can see us crazy people walking around Hasselt, which is a city in Belgium, being dressed up as different local animal species. And with that, I'll hand over to Professor Gomez to change the slides, please. Okay.
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, so maybe we can take already a question while Professor Gomez is setting up his response. I'm happy to be old-fashioned, and you actually talk to me if you want. How about that? Any questions?
Do you see universities interacting the government or the community to get these types of initiatives there, or universities too far out in the goal?
So the question is, what's the role of universities in making some of these things happen? Yeah, I think it depends on the university. Our university is, I think, pretty good. It's quite strong in the area of engagement, community engagement. So we do have quite a bit of support in different academics leaving the office, getting their hands dirty, doing real-world projects, not just working on theory. But at the same time, some of these theories I've introduced today, they actually come from the environmental humanities, and it's quite exciting to be using design research and design practice as the vehicle to translate academic theory with the practice in the real world.
Okay, thank you.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations, Professor Marcos. Thank you very much. I speak in Portuguese, but I live in Netherlands and understand English very well, but speak only Dutch. Vou ser bem rápido. Eu trabalho com inovação e empreendedorismo, então, como me pediram fazer um pitch aqui, serei bem rápido. Vou tentar fazer em 5 minutos rapidinho isso que está aqui para falar. Vou começar falando de um projeto muito grande que a gente tem, começou em 2013, que chama Voto à Inovação, já foi falado hoje. É um projeto que é grande para a gente, porque acabou em 2018 virando um projeto da cidade que se chama Floripa Conecta. Um projeto de economia criativa no que a gente trabalha. Foi um projeto que esses livros estão à disposição, se alguém quiser ver como ele funciona, como ele andou. Nós estamos vivendo uma era pós-digital. Eu vou pular isso aqui, vou chegar no final dela. O mais importante é isso aqui. Não sei se vocês leram ou assistiram o filme Eu, o Robô. Né? É exatamente essa era que nós vivemos, e eu me apaixonei por alguma coisa que o professor Marcos falou, sobre essa cidade inteligente, ou Smart City 5.0, onde já não há mais uma diferença entre ser e estar ligado à internet, à tecnologia. Temos que ser humanos, temos que ser gente, temos que ser pessoas que se desenvolvem, porque nós não somos nem tão pessoas, nem tão máquinas. Nós só sentimos falta da tecnologia quando ela não está ali. E essa é a nova... É a nova Smart City 5.0. Né? O Will Smith contra, quem não viu, vou fazer um spoilerzinho, contra os robôs que estão desenvolvendo uma guerra contra os seres humanos, porque os seres humanos vão acabar com o planeta se eles não forem destruídos. E, contrariando ao que acontece no filme do Exterminador, onde máquinas brigam com os seres humanos, a Skynet não existe, porque é uma mistura entre seres humanos e máquinas. Quem não assistiu o Exterminador o último, vou dar um spoilerzinho, agora a heroína do filme é uma pessoa que ela foi aperfeiçoada, né? Então o aperfeiçoamento das pessoas é que levou a essa cena aqui bem importante do filme. Ele não é só humano, ele é máquina também. Nós estamos vivendo isso. As máquinas fazem parte da gente. Nosso aparelho celular é a extensão do nosso corpo. É isso tudo que tem acontecido. Por isso, a gente está vivendo, se o computador passasse... Oi? Entrou na linha? Não importa, meu pitch é rápido mesmo. Eu quero falar do projeto que a gente tem aqui na cidade, que chama-se Centro Sapiens, que basicamente é esse projeto da Smart City 5.0, onde pessoas e tecnologias são super envolvidas, trabalham efetivamente. Nós pegamos um espaço no centro da cidade, um espaço que estava degradado e esquecido, colocamos lá inteligência. O espaço do Centro Sapiens, ou do Centro Histórico Leste da cidade, virou inteligente. Nós levamos para lá pessoas para que revisitassem o espaço, usando da tecnologia como solução para os projetos da cidade. Nós vivemos isso. Nós colocamos lá o que o Marcos falou, que nós colocamos lá pessoas trabalhando pela cidade, cidadãos discutindo o que é a cidade, pessoas gostando do que é a cidade. E nós fizemos lá um lugar diferente, um lugar onde a gente criou um laboratório de cocriação, como se fosse um grande living lab. Pegamos um estacionamento de carros mal usado e transformamos numa praça de trabalho com Wi-Fi free, com discussão de pessoas, com pessoas envolvidas na cidade. É isso que o Marcos falou. A gente quer construir uma relevância para o centro histórico de Florianópolis, uma relevância para a cidade de Florianópolis em algum espaço. Isso vai se multiplicar. Nossa ideia é que isso seja como um vírus que vá se expandindo pelo resto da cidade e trazendo para a cidade essa perspectiva de uma cidade nova, de uma cidade de uma referência nova, de uma cidade que traz a tecnologia não longe do cidadão, mas do lado dele. Não longe do cidadão, seja ele alta renda, baixa renda, seja ele rico, pobre, classe A, B, C, D, negro, branco, homossexual, heterossexual. Nós queremos trazer isso todo num processo de revitalização da cidade a partir de um lugar base, que é o histórico de Florianópolis. Isso nos levou a fazer projetos tão grandes que hoje nós estamos sendo chamados por cidades do país inteiro para fazer isso. Nosso laboratório de cocriação, hoje, que era um pequeno laboratório com apenas uma sede no centro de Florianópolis, hoje, em 2020, já vai ter 25 sedes no país inteiro. Nós estamos mostrando que o Co-Creation Lab, que construiu isso, como o Daniel falou logo no começo, não vai só mudar Florianópolis, vai mudar o país. Graças a essa Smart City 5.0 que a gente quer fazer. Pessoas, pessoas e pessoas. Tecnologia.
Do we have time for a question?
Until the messages come out of this traditional method. So Professor Gomez, I try to understand you in my Portuguese, which is inexistent, but I understood a little bit. What are the co-creation practices, experiences, the city of Florianópolis? I know that there are quite a lot of experimentation in living labs, but what are there any results?
Please, repeat.
Please. Florianópolis have a number of attempts to establishing living labs in the cities in various areas and topics. And I was wondering whether you can elaborate in some of them as success factors or some of the failures of these attempts to co-create with the public some
policies and some projects for the city?
Bom, eu gosto de falar muito da metodologia que a gente usa. Eu sei que nós estamos num ambiente acadêmico e difícil de falar esse tipo de palavra, mas a metodologia que a gente usa é uma metodologia bem tradicional, que é tirar a bunda da cadeira. Trabalhar, fazer acontecer. Só vai funcionar um processo como esse se a gente sair daqui e fazer acontecer. Não adianta eu ter filosofias enormes, metodologias maravilhosas, técnicas espetaculares. Se eu não levantar e fazer acontecer, isso não acontece. E em Florianópolis há esse diferencial. As pessoas fazem acontecer. Apesar do ecossistema não ser totalmente ecossistema, às vezes tem um pouquinho de ecossistema, as pessoas gostam do trabalho. Então as pessoas fazem acontecer. E é isso que a gente faz. A gente levanta e faz. Não fica só pensando, elucubrando, desenvolvendo teorias. Nós fazemos. Coffee break, please.
É uma pergunta do professor, mas eu acho que pode ir nos dois sentidos. Utilizando essa cidade 5.0, como que a natureza se relaciona com a tecnologia, como que ela está inserida dentro da cidade 5.0?
Eu posso responder o que eu respondi para você na hora do almoço? Não, né? É o seguinte, a gente tem trabalhado muito com isso. Se você conheceu o nosso projeto, e eu vou usar uma frase do nosso governo, estão convidados vocês, né, para irem visitar o Centro Histórico Leste de Florianópolis, o Centro Sapiens, na qual a gente construiu lá uma floresta móvel, em um parque onde era tudo concreto, e a gente colocou árvores que se movimentam para dar essa relação da natureza com a cidade, tentando trazer isso. Nós estamos fazendo projetos como a figueira, a famosa figueira, conversar com você, contar se ela foi bem tratada, se ela foi mal tratada. Se você for lá e for na Praça 15, tem um aplicativo hoje. Você coloca na figueira, eu ia mostrar aqui, você coloca lá e ele conversa com você. Olha, hoje veio todas as pessoas aqui. Nossa, eu vim aqui por tal coisa. Ele bate um papo com você. A natureza é fundamental, não vivemos sem ela. E nós brigamos por ela. Por isso nós estamos buscando as melhores soluções. Às vezes não são as mais eficientes, mas as que a gente pode conseguir.
If I just quickly add another comment to it in English, I think it's a really good question, because the way that I've explained the City 5.0 to kind of refer to what's next, the question, what's next. The part of it that I haven't really had time to, I suppose, explain a bit further is around how design as a methodology also provides a great tool around speculative futures and using design fiction to try and approximate what we might anticipate coming for us that we need to deal with. So we look at some of the kinds of conditions right now and where we want to be heading, but it's never entirely clear. So my utopian outlook would be that we are creating great urban environments where the bees and the possums can coexist with human activity. But at the same time, I'm really fascinated by a UK TV series called Black Mirror. If those that are on Netflix, they are familiar with Black Mirror, there's an episode about bees as well. Bees have gone extinct, and we've engineered, and this is going back to my query with engineers, that, bees have gone extinct, no worries, we create robot bees, right? And so that kind of ethical problem of just creating human, or using human ingenuity in order to overcome the kinds of problems that we are creating is something that we need to arrest and halt, because once we're just going to say, oh, no worries, we'll have robot bees, then what's next? Eventually we're going to just create our own existence as being redundant. I do agree we should have a vote. Who wants coffee and a break? Yes? I think that motion has been carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. You've been a great audience.
Agradecemos então aos nossos painelistas. Convidamos a vocês para fazer aquela tão esperada pausa.